Welcome to another episode of Founder Unfiltered. It's a show of what founders think but never say. It's what founders don't really talk about. It's the identity crisis when you go from operator to leader, the weird shame of self-promotion, the gap between who you are and who your business needs you to be. My name is Bradley Jacobs. I'm your host, the founder and CEO of Mylance. Today, I'm joined by Mindy Gibbins-Klein, who's a founder and author supporting entrepreneurs to become thoughtful leaders. She's helped over 1,400 leaders write their own books, author of 15 books herself, and delivered 2 TEDx talks. She's coached over 50,000 leaders in 18 countries. And she's also the founder of Giving 1% Project, encouraging people to consider their regular charitable giving. Mindy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
So I'd love for you to really start by expanding on the introduction of really what makes you, what makes you unique, what makes you stand out in a sea of coaches and thought leaders and authors.
Well, I was what they call an accidental entrepreneur. I had 3 redundancies or layoffs in corporate, which was an interesting time. And after the 3rd one, I thought, I'm not willing to play this game anymore. I had 2 little kids. I just didn't want to keep banging my head against a wall and be a slave to the corporate world. So I set up on my own without a plan, really. So most people would be like, where's your business plan? And oh yeah, that would have been nice. But it was, needs must. So after I set up, then I started learning what it was like. And I was lucky I had some money from these, layoff packages. And I started networking, which is something I recommend to all business owners, including or especially those who think they're introverts and, aren't comfortable. We have to do it. We have to get known. Of all the things that I've done across my several businesses, meeting with people, chatting with them, getting them to understand, just building relationships. I'm sure you'd agree, and most of the listeners would agree, that's the top skill and is essential. And it's also a lot cheaper than advertising.
Amazing. So you run companies, you sold a company. Walk us through maybe one of the learnings from turning the company around, selling the company. What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about business?
Turning it around sounds very grandiose, although I did do that, but that was after I took it into the red. So my publishing company, I joined a company that somebody else founded, and, he wanted me there, and we ran it together for about 5 years. But then he wanted to move in a different direction. So I bought him out, and within 2 years or 3 years, my company, I was the sole owner at that point, was making a loss for the first time in its history. And I know why it happened. I, listened to people who didn't understand my industry. I made certain decisions. I was a bit reckless. I got a bit trigger happy with printing books that, we didn't need. So we made that loss. And then it took me 4 years to crawl out of the red. And I can't believe that we stayed in business, but it was again through relationships that saved us. So I spoke to suppliers, partners, even clients, and, arranged things, and people were, really, really helpful. So after 4 years, we were back in the black, and I realized that I was not the best person to run that business. I'd taken it over because my co-founder wanted to leave, but it wasn't really my pride and joy. So I started seriously looking to sell it, which I did 5 years later.
Wow. What a story. So that must have been incredibly challenging to buy out your business partner, then have 4 years as an unprofitable business. And what was that like? I mean, how did you navigate that emotionally?
Well, the good thing is that while you're in it, you don't realize it's going to be 4 years. It's kind of like the pandemic, we took it one day at a time. How long is this thing going to go on? It's very similar. um, so it was just one foot in front of the other, 1 month and the next month, one quarter, and I was trying lots of things to reduce costs and get more revenue in and improve the bottom line, and stuff kept happening. But I guess I was determined. And the thing is, I was determined to keep the company going. It wasn't a pride or ego thing. Like I say, I didn't have a big ego. I thought I wasn't even the best person to run it. But I just couldn't let it fold because we had at that time, I think, about 100 authors. And their books would just go away. I thought, we can't do that. Having authored some books, we know people who've authored books. When the publisher goes bust, it creates a real problem. So I was doing everything I could to keep it going. I didn't tell a lot of people at the time what was happening. I didn't want to worry people. So I had some sleepless nights and I took it all on myself. But I also knew that I had the strength and resilience and determination, and we were going to come out the other side of it. And that it all worked out.
Yeah. Where did that self-belief come from? I think that's something people can really struggle with from what I've seen and experienced myself. That confidence, like, we're going to figure this out and I'm going to be the one to do it.
Without divulging my actual age, I grew up in the working world of the 1980s. And that was a real thing. I feel really blessed to have been coached by people and had bosses who were really on the ball. And, I don't know, that can-do attitude, and not like, Wall Street. Although I did work on Wall Street when I worked in New York, but that wasn't for me. Although I think growing up in the States, I was very lucky because I was kind of imbued with this sense of can do and must do and, keep going, and optimism. And one of my bosses was very lucky to be trained personally by Tony Robbins, who I then started to follow. So there are some great teachers out there. And if you get the learning early on, it stays with you for life. So I was very lucky.
Really, what I'm hearing you say is that's a necessity that you feel like you got lucky with, but you learn from a bunch of managers of, we're going to be able to figure this out, and this kind of optimism, this positivity, which can be really challenging, especially when things aren't going well. Right. And so what would you say to a founder who's in a tough spot right now with their business? Maybe they're questioning things, they're not getting the results that they want to see. What do they do?
Read the right books, listen to the right podcasts. So in one of my books, The Thoughtful Leader, it's my flagship book, I say choose your influences and your influencers. Many people think they're choosing their influences, but they're not. If you're triggered by something you're reading, or you're doom scrolling and things like that, well, you can choose to, I call it the power of the UN, unfollow and unsubscribe and unplug if necessary, and go towards the more positive things to feed yourself. We need to be strong. And that's our sort of best skill. The most important thing for the founder is to be strong and centered and grounded and as confident as can be. So we need to do everything we can to foster that. And then everything else comes from that. If you want to inspire people, you need to inspire yourself first. And so take a look at the things that are dragging you down and change those habits. I'm laughing about it because, I'm making it sound really easy. I also still get caught up with, the doom scrolling and the, but I notice it, and I have blocked so many accounts and things that don't actually serve me, so I can serve others.
It does come down to our systems, our habits, our beliefs, our behaviors, which are influenced by the people around us. I mean, in such a big way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the people around us and the influencers and influences that we're looking at and listening to every day. With some clients, I tell them to do an audit and look at the pages they're following and look and notice when they get triggered and
Mm.
lots of things like that. They don't realize that they've sort of, accumulated all of this reading material and they're not listening to empowering and inspiring content. So what do we think is going to happen if we're not feeding ourselves the right things, right?
If you think about those 4 years that were incredibly challenging, not profitable, and then you turned it around, was it changing your habits, changing your influences and influencing and influences, or were you like, what changed?
I had to become even more humble. So I really didn't want to share what was going on with many people, but I had to in certain instances where I had suppliers and we had terms and we had, bills that were due, and I needed to be open and honest with them. And once I did that, most of them have been there. Most business owners have had those moments and we can relate. But, if we think somebody's just trying to avoid paying a bill, that's not very nice. But if they explain exactly what's going on and there's a ripple effect from something else or, a pandemic, a war, a, crisis, then we can begin to talk about these things. So that was part of it. I also got very good advice and brainstormed with the contract lawyer who had worked with me on just contracts. I say just contracts, but she wasn't advising me on anything else. But I just happened to open up to her, and we had a really good conversation, and we came up with a strategy to make sure that we weren't leaking so much money. And
Mm.
that wasn't her job, but obviously she cared, and we passed each other a lot of business. And that was one of the best things that happened, because in a conversation I just said, hey, I'm at a loss, and we figured it out together.
And then you, after that turnaround, you decided you're not the best person to run the company. Why not?
Even before that, I felt a bit unsure. It's just, we all have our favorite things that we like to do, usually because we're good at them. And when I joined that company initially, it was in a sales and marketing capacity. And that's my skill set. That's my, superpower, whatever you want to call it. Operations and commercial stuff was not it. And it didn't thrill me. And I didn't want to be the managing director, but I was the de facto managing director because there was no one else. And I was willing to do it because, like I say, he wanted to go, and there wasn't anyone else, and I couldn't find someone else at short notice. So I took it on. I think I didn't know what I could do it. Well, obviously I wasn't the best person because I drove the company into a loss situation, but I also knew that I wasn't enjoying it. It wasn't my passion because I was running the coaching company, and I wanted to be coaching and speaking and training 100% of the time. And this publishing company was taking up, well, I know exactly how much time, because when I sold it, I freed up 35 hours a week of my time.
Uh,
Yeah. So, but at the time, I just put my head down and did it because, that was important to keep it going. And I just, whatever it takes, I did whatever it took.
Mindy, I'm curious. I'm hearing you take radical ownership for taking the company into the red, right? You're like, I did this. We're like, okay, yes, maybe, right? You were a leader at the time, and that's what happened with the company. Maybe no matter who the leader was, that was going to happen. There's a million other things at play, market forces and competition and pricing and on down the line that contributed to that. And yet I'm hearing you take this like, I did this.
Okay, Brad. It's one of the values that we have at the Thoughtful Leader is take ownership, take responsibility, no hiding, no playing the blame game. you know, if every leader, if you just think about leaders in business and leaders of countries, if they actually took ownership and took responsibility and took the blame at times, then they could move on. Then they develop more trust, and it's just the way I operate. So, I don't beat myself up about it. I'm telling you what happened because we need to be self-aware, and I can tell you what I'm great at the same time. So it's balanced out. It's just one of those things. As the leader of the company, the buck stopped with me. And for any,
Mhm.
company owners or leaders listening, the buck stops with you. That's just the way it is.
It is. And I love it. I also think it's really empowering for a leader to say, I am responsible for the company's success, meaning it is on my shoulders and I can dictate whether we succeed or, I don't want to say fail because I don't even really believe in that, but, have a more negative outcome, right? That we don't want. So it can be empowering. And it also can be a really challenging spot, right? For obvious reasons. And I heard you say, I don't beat myself up about it. I'm just telling you objectively what happened, right? You're a little bit removing your, let's say, identity. You are not the company. The reality is, as a leader of the company, you contributed to these, you led these results.
Right.
And that's where my next question comes in, because it's this really interesting nuance where when you're in full ownership, full accountability, it's a beautiful thing and it can easily lead, not in your case, I'm hearing you draw a beautiful distinction and a boundary, but for other people, it can really lead to this shame of like, I'm bad or I'm a bad leader or making it about me. And then I see you taking a deep breath, like these personal feelings of like, I'm not
Yeah.
good. Right.
It
So,
could,
how,
yeah, to someone with, who hasn't got a robust sense of self-esteem, understanding of self. Like I said earlier, I was blessed to have worked with people, very talented people, a lot of personal development from an early age. And that sustains me, and that's always going to be there. I appreciate not everybody has that, but even in a one person business, and I've scaled my business up, my coaching business, and I've scaled it back to the point where right now it's just me and a few freelancers I use for things, but it's me. And yet I am not the business. So having that separation, you're right, is really important. Equally, I turned that business around. And so if someone's listening to us now and thinking, oh, we've got this problem, that problem, the staff problems and the economy and what, yeah. And if you are taking complete responsibility, you could take responsibility for the good stuff as well. Balancing out the pride and versus ego. I would never want to come across as arrogant, but with that contract lawyer friend of mine, we came up with a really good idea and a really good model, which turned the company around within months.
hmm.
And I'm really proud of that. So you can also take ownership of the good stuff.
I feel like the ownership of the good stuff is, for some reason, maybe you can tell me why, it seems like it's frowned upon in our society where people are so quick to be overly humble and diminish their accomplishments and oh, I had a whole team behind me. And I, I,
Oh,
I
no.
hear this all of the time. I'm
Do
like, no,
you?
what if you were to just own that you were an amazing leader, that you did this? I mean,
Look, it could be performative. It could be somebody thinks they should sound humble or
yeah.
be a servant leader or one of these things. That's fine. We also need to be strong and exhibit that kind of leadership quality that people want to follow. My personal feeling is that being too humble and focusing on being a servant leader is not all that inspiring.
Mm.
I'm not saying people need a bully or a bulldozer, but there is something about a strong leader showing the way. I mean, I teach this in my classes. Do we know where the word leadership comes from? You want me to share a little snippet?
Please do.
The word leader comes from the Old English, I think it's pronounced laidar, and it means to show the way ahead. And we need to actually stop, see the way ahead, know where we're going, and then we can lead others. We can, shine that light and show them the path. That's what people do want. So it obviously, I talk about thoughtful leadership, but that doesn't mean shrinking back and being nicey and not being a strong leader that gives people confidence. So it's both.
Yeah, I mean, you even see it. I'm a big sports fan. You see when the coach wins the game or the championship or whatever it is, and they get interviewed, and probably the first thing they say, they might like think, God or Jesus or something like that. And then they're like, oh, I couldn't have done it without this team. Right. Or it's really like those are the guys on the field or something like that. And it's an interesting balance of like, it's true. You want to give credit to the team. But at the end of the day, the coach, they're not winning without that coach.
And if any solopreneurs are listening to us, claim it, own it, because it is all about you. I mean, you are not the business, but you are very closely aligned with that business.
And those mindsets, like, and I hear it all the time of, oh, it's a really tough market out there. And they're kind of blaming the circumstance and the situation. And I always come back and I say, look, it may not be the market that we had a number of years ago where, VC money was flooding and whatever, but there are plenty of people winning big. They have plenty of clients, growing their businesses, customers, scaling, hiring. So you can either decide it's a tough market and like throw your hands up in the air, or you can be like, I don't give a shit. Right. And in fact, I even tell people it's like, this is the opportunity to stand out. Because if there's a little bit less business to go around than there was 4 years ago, you need to be one of the winners. So how do you get to be one of the winners?
Are you asking me, how do we get to be one of the winners?
Sure. Yeah. Let's do it.
My background and my work is all about people expressing their best insights, their wisdom. How do you get to be one of the winners? I'll use a very hackneyed word, visibility, which obviously should lead to credibility, unless you're visible and people are like, but good visibility for the right reasons with the right stuff leads to credibility. And, that it's just a fact that we need to be seen. Like I was saying earlier, like right at the beginning, I was talking about networking. So you don't need to be seen by hundreds of thousands of people. It really depends on the market. But what I look at is how to be seen by a few of the right people. I love chatting. This what we're doing now, my favorite thing in the world. And I do this all day long. I have about 25 conversations per week, about 5 a day on average. And we chat and we see where it goes. Obviously, we had a point today and we're filming and stuff. But, one of the biggest mistakes people make is they think I need to be everywhere and I need, hundreds of thousands of followers. And you might do really well with a handful. So when I did run the publishing company, we had a few standout books. So this is a parallel with being a business owner. And obviously they were all business books. So what happened was people would say, well, how many copies did he sell? And I would say, well, I have no idea. Well, I had an idea, but I wasn't going to say it was like 1,000. It didn't sound that impressive. I was just telling this story today, in fact, to somebody. And I said, this particular book we were talking about, I think it sold 1,000 copies, but the author took a copy to a meeting with a CEO, and it impressed that CEO so much it led to $1 million deal. So does it matter that the book only sold 1,000 copies? So the parallel is, if you only have 1,000 contacts on LinkedIn and somebody says, oh, you need 20,000, do you? Or could you make sure that you have a chat or a conversation with as many as possible in that 1,000? There is gold in them hills in those contacts. There's gold just sitting there. So that's what I believe anyway.
I couldn't agree more. And our product helps people show up on LinkedIn in an authentic, genuine, resonant way, not for clicks and impressions. And I was like, I don't care how many impressions your post got. That's not what we're going for. We're going for quality, like the right people. So yeah, I love so much of what you're saying. And I'm curious if we can double click on visibility. I mean, it feels like it's everything, right? It's like you could have the best product service in the world, but if you're not visible, it almost doesn't matter. Like you have to be willing to get out there. And obviously you believe this so in such a big way. Um, what holds people back the most from being willing to put themselves out there and be visible in the market?
Okay, so first, let's talk about the only two ways in which we can communicate, and that is spoken or written. That's it. So if we talk about speaking, podcast interviews, some people freeze, I guess. I'm lucky to have been on a stage from an early age, but some people get very scared about speaking, looking at a camera, speaking on a stage. So all of those things, it's a known fear. I suggest people do it anyway. Get out of their comfort zone, get training, get hypnosis, practice, be bad, have fun. I laugh at myself when I make a mistake on stage. Happens all the time, happens to everybody. So if you don't laugh, then, the audience is uncomfortable. Be a real person. So that's, speaking and being filmed. And I get it. It's real. I also understand people's fear of writing, even though I work with them to help them through it. Most people, if they've not written before, they might have a limiting belief that comes from, I don't know, a teacher might have said, oh, you're not good at writing. And what she meant was your spelling's bad. Hello, we have spell check now, run it through AI, well, don't do that maybe, but there's a difference. And I think if somebody hasn't done a lot of writing, it can be scary. And they're thinking, oh, I'm exposed. The same with speaking. If you do a video, people are, going to see you X number of times. So I had to just get over myself. I've done so many videos and the TEDx talks are out there. And yeah, I look at it and I think, oh, I made a facial expression, or too bad. I was getting my message across. And what is the alternative? You don't do it, and then nobody gets to hear what you have to say. So I usually land on the fact that if someone has an important message and they don't share it, they are doing their market and themselves and their creator a disservice, because we were put on this earth to help others and to share what we've seen, what we've experienced, and insights that can support other people on their journey. I think it's very sad when people don't.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. One thing you said is be willing to be bad. And I think that's what holds so many people back, is their fear of, that they're not going to speak well. Their content's not going to resonate. They're going to be judged. People are going to disagree with them. I had someone comment on one of my posts. She disagreed with me on something, and then she sent me a DM almost like to back down a little bit. She's like, I just want to let you know like where I was coming from. And I'm like, it's okay. Like you can disagree with me. It's fine. Like I kind of welcome it. It's like, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. Creates this conversation, which I think is valuable, but the willingness to just have that happen and be a beginner, be bad, be judged feels like the biggest thing.
I'm going to paraphrase Winston Churchill, who said something like, you have haters? Good. That means you're saying something.
Yeah.
Yes, it is annoying, and we take it personally in this sort of thing. But I do believe that communication online could be more respectful in most cases. So, you know, block or report something, or just, like I say, just unfollow and don't respond. Don't let it affect everything. Is really funny because I found myself saying over the past few weeks to friends and family, when something goes wrong, oh, and they go, well, and I'll say, don't let it ruin your day. So it's really, move on. Very easy to say. I sound very glib. I'm telling myself this numerous times a day.
Right, right. And when someone if someone really gets upset with me, especially online, I usually try to think about what their day might be like, and like almost like create a scenario of like, oh, maybe they got in a fight with their partner, or their kids having a temper tantrum that day. They didn't sleep at all last night, whatever. Because it's usually not about me. I'd say actually it's never about me, right? If they're saying something rude, hurtful, mean, whatever it is,
Mm.
like that's not about me.
No, and you can be the bigger person, and you can let it go. One of the things that I encourage clients to do is step back, don't respond, especially if somebody is putting a review on your book and people want to go back and say, yeah, but don't get into that. If it's really offensive, you can get things removed. I assume that goes for LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. There's no need for rudeness. I'm a bit of a Pollyanna. I just surround myself with lovely things, lovely thoughts, and lovely people, and it sort of perpetuates that lovely mood. But some people have, a chip on their shoulder, or they've had a bad day, like you say. So you decide, am I going to let this ruin my day now? Nah.
When you said be willing to be bad, and you said, well, luckily I was put in front of people at a young age. And it's an important point I want to double click on, because my guess is you weren't a world renowned speaker your first time.
No, I was so nervous. What happened was I was a trainer, and I do think there's a difference. I'm still a trainer more than a speaker. I enjoy both, but I had a good grounding for 3 years doing a 6-day residential training program on my own after the first few months. 6 days of training salespeople on a sales methodology, and I was 23 years old. So, talk about baptism by fire. I was really lucky to have had that experience, and I'd done a little acting as a kid. But the first time I put speaker in my profile, because, you're supposed to call yourself a speaker, not a trainer, I got a gig, and I can picture it, and I can remember how it felt. And I really had to kind of master my breathing and my emotions and everything. And I thought, yeah, I've done a great job. And I watched the video. Normally I don't. And I thought, I thought that was good. I'm not one that beats myself up, like I said. Someone said, oh, you were really good. You sounded nervous, but you were good. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's your interpretation, but that's not going to stop me. And I went on to do a whole lot more speaking, ran the Professional Speaking Association in London for 2 years, and continue to speak and train. You just keep going, and not every gig is going to be perfect. Not every piece you write is going to get traction or land the way it needs to. So it just all goes into the pot.
And I think for professionals, let's say you've been in a career for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you didn't really need to be that visible, right? Because you were an employee of a company. Then you go out on your own, either solopreneur, founder, writing a book, whatever it is, and you're like, shit, I've never done this before. And I have this community of past coworkers, past managers, all of these people who are maybe now part of my community that I don't want to look stupid in front of. I don't want to look bad, but I'm
Get over
new.
it. Get over
Get over it. Get over it.
That's not a self-help or personal development strategy. That's Mindy saying, do you really want to spend time with that mantra, or would you rather have something more empowering? I mean, speaking of mantras, before we finish, because I want to run out of time, I wonder if people have words that they say to themselves. So people listening, I was lucky to hone mine with Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny. And over the years, I've just repeated it a million times to myself. That I find that really important because, we are talking to ourselves all the time in our heads or out loud. Depends if we're, working from home. And we can, in fact, feed ourselves, again, back to that phrase, with something empowering, and we can create it. So I would recommend that wholeheartedly. If anybody wants my tips and the structure of those kind of statements, just contact me, because it's been so helpful for me to repeat it over and over, and it's kind of gone in as a very, very strong belief.
Amazing. Are you willing to share that mantra, or is that a private thing for you?
I have a very long version, which is more along the lines of Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, that kind of format. But the short version, I wonder if I can remember the short version. So the purpose of my life is to be a source of inspiration and joy, to share my abundant energy, and to encourage others to speak their truth and live their truth.
Wow. So that's what you say to yourself all the time, good, bad, doesn't matter.
When I remember. Sometimes I get caught up, and I think, sure. Or if I'm having a moment, we have a moment, I will just, take a deep breath. I'm really into breathing and deep breaths, and then say that. And it's just because it's familiar. It's like, some people are really into their prayers and things like that. But the reason why this is different is, it's personal.
Mindy, we get to wrap up here in a minute. I'd love an opportunity for you to self-promote. How can people find you? Where can people find you? How do you work with people? What does that look like?
Thank you. So funny, because my first instinct was, be humble, be a servant leader. I'm like, scratch that.
Nope.
Most people can find me on mindygk.com. So I know that will be in the show notes. I've aimed to put the business links and the charity link through that. I'm very happy to chat with people. Hopefully they've got that message. So just connect. LinkedIn, I'm obviously happy to be followed. I have a few connections left at any time, because just when I was heading for the hundreds of thousands, they capped it at 30,000. So believe it or not, I'm almost always at capacity. But people can reach out, send me an email. We'll connect. If somebody wants to have a chat, we'll have a chat. But mindygk.com. People can Google me as well, and find articles, blogs, videos, all sorts of things, and my books. So yeah, that's the best way to reach me, I think.
Awesome. Well, we'll certainly link everything in the show notes, and really appreciate your time, energy, insights with the audience. I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you and learn from you. So I really appreciate it, Mindy.
Oh, thank you. I've had a great time. I wish we could go on, but we can't.
I know. There'll be part 2.
Maybe. See you.
All right. Thanks, Mindy.